Press Radio Bureau.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Hello and welcome back to the FrameLab podcast. Hey, George.
Hey, Gil.
Well, it's been a really exciting week. Kamala Harris announced her candidacy for president. And George, you've been saying for quite some time that the heart of the Democratic Party can be found in the phrase government of the people, by the people, and for the people, which comes from a speech by Abraham Lincoln. And anyone who listens to the FrameLab or who reads your stuff online is familiar with your insistence that this phrase, more than any other, encompasses the meaning of progressive ideas and thought. And when Senator Harris announced her candidacy, she did it with a slogan for her campaign that is quite a familiar phrase. What is that?
For the people. And what she said was, I am for the people. As if other candidates are not. And, of course, the Democratic Party has, in general, adopted the phrase for the people as well. So every Democrat is, given the slogan for the people. So there's nothing special about Kamala in that way, but she presents herself as such. And then there's a question, what does that mean for her? And what do people make of it? And what does she say?
Well, it would be kind of great if every presidential candidate running as a Democrat ran on the slogan of for the people. Then there could be a debate between all the candidates in the frame of what does it mean to be for the people? What does it mean to be for the people? I know we've talked about that before, but for those who maybe you're just tuning in or haven't listened in a while, what does it mean to be for the people?
Well, there's the idea that government, the role of government, especially if you're running for a public office, should not be for the corporations as opposed to the people. That is, when you say for the people, you're drawing a contrast between people and corporations and people who are ordinary people. That is, the term people there is talking about ordinary folks as opposed to wealthy folks in particular. And what they're saying is, I'm for the ordinary folks, which is most folks. And, and therefore I'm not for just the wealthy, and I'm not just for the corporations, and so on. So it's a contrast. And it's, and instead of getting up there and saying, I'm against corporations, which she's not saying and probably is not, you're implicitly saying you're for the people as opposed to being for corporations.
And so you watched the speech, and how do you think she did at articulating those values and that vision as a Democrat?
Well, it sounded to me like she had made a list of all of the progressive positions she could think of. And then she went down the list of the things she was for.
So Medicare for all, debt-free college, universal kindergarten.
All of those things. Just one after another, things having to do with voting rights and so on. I mean, just make a list of progressive things which, they're real, they're important, and so on. And she went down the list. And she says, what it means to be for the people is to be a progressive in the sense of this list. Now, to be honest, I could not possibly argue against anything in that list, being a progressive. Yes, and she got a pretty good list. So, given that that's what she did, she's coming out and saying, I am, right in the heart of progressivism. And then she also made a pitch being a woman. Talking about her mother and her mother's values and being a tough woman, being a prosecutor, not being a namby-pamby woman or a woman who's going to give in to men and so on, but someone who could stand up against men, because that's what she would have to do in a presidential bid, or in any run for office.
And that's what she's done in the courtroom, right? I think I've seen some progressives have criticized her for being a prosecutor, saying that, you're someone who's locked up people and who's put people of color in jail. You're on the wrong side of criminal justice reform, etc. But I do think that, in a way, if she were to be a candidate in a general election against a Republican, it would be really hard for them to pin on her the softness that the right wing usually tries to pin on a Democrat, because she is someone who's been a prosecutor, who's been in combat in the courtroom with men against criminals. She's framed it as being a progressive prosecutor, somebody who protects victims. But I guess a question I have for you is, in terms of the metaphor between a nurturant parent or a mother and a strict parent or the strict father, doesn't the prosecutorial career give Kamala Harris in a general election the chance to try to appeal to biconceptuals with those tougher elements of her history?
Well, not just of her history, but of her demeanor. If you see her in Senate hearings, she is a tough prosecutor. She is talking tough on every question. It's as if she's never not a prosecutor. That's her public image when she's, before Congress, talking up to witnesses. She's a prosecutor there, and she's tough. So the whole idea, and saying her mother was tough, and her mother taught her to be tough, and so on. And she had to be tough being a woman to get to where she's gotten. So the idea of being tough is built into that. And it's important to see that being a nurturing parent does not mean being lenient or letting a child do whatever they want. Being a nurturing parent means raising a child to do what is good for the child. And that sometimes means saying, hey, you don't do this. You don't run into the street. You don't put your hands on the stove. You have to tell children to be safe, what to do, and what is right to do, and how to treat
go to school. Truancy was one of her big issues that some people have fired on her for.
Yeah, I mean, going to school, being nice to other kids, not hitting other kids. I mean, all sorts of things like that. That's nurturance. That is not a bad thing. So one question is, can she, for liberals, say, hey, as a prosecutor, I'm actually being kind to people. It's a tough sell. Being tough, it's a tough sell.
At the same time, Robert Mueller's a prosecutor,
mm-hmm.
and everybody seems to, Robert Mueller is a prosecutor, and everybody seems to really like that prosecutor because he is potentially going after a president who may be at the heart of a vast criminal conspiracy. Roger Stone mm-hmm. just got a wake-up call from the FBI, from unpaid, furloughed FBI agents this week. So not all prosecutors are bad if you're a progressive.
Exactly. Mueller is a progressive hero for going after the bad guys.
And he's a Republican. So maybe there's some sensibility there and some chance for Harris to use her prosecutorial background to her advantage. And for full disclosure for all of our listeners, I used to work for Kamala Harris. And during that time, George, you and I actually worked together on one of the first things we ever worked on. I called you for some advice on how to frame the argument in terms of in favor of marriage equality. And we worked on a little thing together. And the result of that was a little segment on MSNBC, I believe, that Think Progress called the most powerful argument in favor of marriage equality you'll see in under 1 minute. So I think that was the first time we worked together, that we so quickly realized that was a more powerful argument than usual. So we do have a little bit of history there with Kamala Harris. Quick question before we switch subjects here. Do you think she can go all the way?
No.
Why not?
Well, there are many reasons why I don't think she can go all the way. I don't think she's convinced people that she is both progressive and tough in the way that is needed to go against Trump. There are other women who are perhaps tougher than she is. And it's a certain senator from Massachusetts, for example. It's hard for any woman to be in that position. Trump starts out with the strict father advantage. 37% plus or minus 2 of the country has strict father morality. He starts right there. He's still at 37%, even, no matter how bad he's doing. He's going to be at 37%. That's the magic number there. He's not going to fall much below the 37%. And it's important to understand that he has a base that way, as any strict father would. So he's starting out there. Kamala is not going to get anywhere with that base.
Kamala
is not going to get anywhere with that base. And, not a chance. I mean, with the list of every liberal possible position, she's not going to get anywhere with that
Does
base.
she need that base to get there, though?
Well, if she's going for the tough base, that's the tough base.
But what about the biconceptuals who can see a progressive prosecutor, someone who has been nurturant but has also been willing to put really bad people who hurt other people in prison?
Yeah, I mean, she can do well with biconceptuals. Mm-hmm. I think that's true. I don't think she's going to get anywhere near the Trump base. Mm-hmm. I don't think she expects to.
No.
So the question is, can she get the biconceptuals, and does she even think in terms of biconceptuals? And I doubt that she does.
Well, and I want to just clarify, when you say she and other women are going to have a hard time, you're talking about the ingrained sexism in our society that holds women to a much higher standard and refuses to see them as in leadership roles.
That's right. That's exactly right.
We do see some of that changing, right? And on our next segment here, we were going to talk about someone who has sort of become, in a way, the de facto cultural leader of the Democratic Party, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who just a year ago was sort of an unknown young woman from the Bronx who took on a longtime congressman from her district, won in a very surprising victory, and has since become a communications sensation in terms of people can't get enough of her. Mm-hmm. Everything she says becomes viral, gets attacked by the right wing. They can't resist going after her on everything she says. And this has made her into maybe the most prominent Democratic voice in America. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is the speaker, and there's no denying her power. But when you look out there every day, what you're most likely going to see is somebody responding to or going after or agreeing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is now referred to as AOC because her name is kind of many syllables to say she's got 2 last names. So we've been talking about her behind the scenes here and admiring some of what she's been able to do. And in a way, she's almost sort of an antidote to Trump because they have some similar characteristics in terms of how their opponents react to them and how the media reacts to them. For instance, everything she says gets attacked. This means that millions and millions and millions of people see it. The right wing, the conservatives, Fox News, they cannot help but go after her every time she says something. And this has generally been backfiring on them. So, George, I know you're familiar with some of her stuff. We've been looking at some of her tweets and seeing some of the stuff she's done. What makes AOC so powerful?
Well, there are a number of things to be said. I wrote a book called Don't Think of an Elephant, because when you negate something, negate a frame, you activate the frame and you make it stronger. And so getting attacked is good for her in this way, just as Trump understands that getting attacked is good for him. So, this is the don't think of an elephant principle, and it's a very important principle in politics, and she understands that very well. She welcomes attacks for just that reason. A good person to contrast her with is Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is probably has the same positions on virtually everything, but what she does is come at it from the point of view of grace with power. As Nancy Pelosi has a certain power and wields it with grace, with carefully, takes positions that are like, Ocasio-Cortez's positions.
Just call her AOC.
AOC's positions, and but does it in a way that doesn't just immediately get people to attack her, although plenty of people are attacking her. It's not that she's not attacked, but the attacks are different because Nancy does everything with power and grace. And AOC is not trying to do that. She's out there being blunt, being straightforward about what she believes, no questions asked. And if you look at her language, it's not the language of Nancy Pelosi at all. It's not, measured. Nancy Pelosi is always measured. This is not a person, AOC is not, a measured person. She's out there saying what she believes starkly, straightforwardly, no apologies, no attempting to make it softer or something like that.
It's a very authentic, direct flow of communication.
Well, authenticity is very important to her. And this is right. The word authentic is right. She is authentic. And that is one of her great virtues. That is, she's, and also will draw attacks. I mean, she's an authentic progressive. No questions about it. She says, I'm a social democrat. No question about it.
Speaking of being a social democrat, one of the things that she's done very powerfully is she frames first. She ignores the frames of the opposition and puts forth progressive ideas in frames. And as we said, she lets others attack her frame and argue within that frame. One of the recent successes she had was she suggested a 70% marginal tax rate for millionaires and billionaires, people making more than $10 million a year. And conservatives went on the attack. It was like catnip for them. And they attacked her so much that they spread the idea around. And millions and millions and millions of Americans heard this idea that we should tax people 70% when they're making 10 million on after they make 10 million or more a year. And now a poll shows that 2/3 of Americans support that idea, including a pretty large number of Republicans. What's the lesson here for Democrats in the grip of poll-driven consultants who want them to say safe things?
The idea is that non-safe things that make sense, non-safe things that that are hard to argue against, are important. That it's important not to be safe, not to sound safe, and she doesn't sound safe. She doesn't come off as somebody who's trying to sound like she's safe. Now, Nancy Pelosi is sounding like she's safe while she's saying, remarkable things. But AOC is not doing that at all.
I will say, and maybe it's the AOC effect, that Pelosi has sounded a bit more direct and blunt lately. And we saw that in her showdown with Trump when she walked into that meeting and she dropped the Trump shutdown hashtag on him and he immediately accepted the frame. And recently when the Republicans were saying that people should go take loans or get the grocery store to give you the groceries on credit, she said these people seem to think that you can just call your daddy for money. And most people don't have that. And that was some pretty real talk, pretty brutal lines that really, I think, connected with people. I think in politics, traditionally, there's been this idea that you can't make a gaffe, that you have to be carefully controlled. Every word has to be planned out and workshopped through the lens of complete safety. Because if you make one gaffe, everybody goes crazy, attacks you, and you have to apologize. But the way that Trump changed the game was that gaffes became the strategy.
Yes.
You say an explosive, bombastic thing, and everybody pays attention to it, but instead of apologizing, you roll with it. And it seems to me that there's been a temperature change in terms of the Democratic Party, and that's why I said at the beginning of this segment, sort of following the lead of AOC in terms of their communication. Now, Twitter is clogged with Congress people live streaming from their kitchens. Elizabeth Warren, when she announced her presidential bid or exploratory committee, was in her kitchen drinking a beer. Everyone seems to have realized that AOC embraced, I don't think she's the first person to do this, but embraced this as a politician. And it has been really successful. It's what people are looking for, more authentic connection. So I would say that I have seen a bit of a change over the past few weeks, especially since Pelosi became Speaker. She's still very dignified and powerful, but she's throwing some elbows, and she always has in a certain way. But I think that now, because of the way, in addition to her words, her actions defeated Trump so soundly in this showdown, that people are realizing the value of her experience and her skill in politics. Pelosi, I mean. So that has been something that has been a change, I think, that we've perceived. It almost seems that Democrats are discovering the art of framing. And in fact, recently on Twitter, just 2 days ago, AOC said she was debating a question with Brian Stelter of CNN, and she said, well, the way you frame the question really matters. And she spoke a bit directly about framing, which is something we generally don't hear politicians do, at least not framing in the terms that you talk about them.
Well, I think that's quite remarkable, and may she do it more. And it's important to talk about framing, obviously, from my point of view, because it's what drives our politics. And getting the framing out there is important. But one of the things that Trump did, and that AOC is taking on, is the idea that what's beyond the pale becomes the new normal if repeated. That repetition and saying it loudly and without apology becomes a new normal. And that is, it can be attacked, and as soon as it's attacked, it's definitely a new normal, as in don't think of an elephant, and you want it to be attacked. So that idea is out there, and, AOC is taking advantage of it.
By the way, the poll that 2/3 of Democrats said they would consider voting for her for president, actually, or I believe that's the number there, and then a similar number for support for the marginal tax rate. So already, and here's the funny thing, she is not eligible to run for president because she's only 29 years old. It'd be 35 to run for president. And so it's amazing that political leaders, elected officials spend millions and millions of dollars, maybe billions altogether, on consultants to try to get the kind of admiration and following that this very young, new congressperson from the Bronx has generated very naturally through communication and values-driven framing. And I think that's pretty amazing. And maybe it took Trump for people to realize the power of that kind of communication, of putting the understanding of the moral values you're dealing with first.
Well, it's not new. I mean, the Kennedys did it. Whether it's Jack Kennedy, Robert Kennedy certainly did it, made it very, very clear that moral values were right up front every time he got up to speak. Teddy Kennedy did it too. I knew Teddy Kennedy very well. And, he was always there. Teddy Kennedy used to call me 9 o'clock from Washington, which was 6 a.m. here, and then made fun of me because I wasn't awake. So
let's return quickly to something that happened. It already seems like old news, but the news moves so quickly these days. The wall. You wrote an op-ed in the Sacramento Bee about Trump's wall of hate and the need for Democrats to stop the wall of hate. You said the wall is really a metaphor for hate, for nationalism, and for white supremacy. Tell us why the wall was a metaphor. for hate?
Well, first of all, it's not literal. I mean, it's not going to stop most of the things it's supposed to stop. But what it means there as a wall, it means we're against you, we don't like you, and we're going to exclude you. So it has a symbolic meaning of hatred and exclusion. It says, we dislike you so much, we're going to put up this wall. I mean, you might dislike somebody. Usually you don't put up walls. You might want to exclude somebody in some way, but, to excluding them with this wall is a very extreme thing. And it's direct versus systemic causation. And this is very important. Direct causation means you go out and you just stop it somehow. And Trump tries to do that with tariffs and with all sorts of other means. That is, he tries to use direct causation, and the wall is that sort of thing. Systemic causation tries to use what's in the system. Traditional democratic politics uses systemic causation. They use regulations here and laws there, and some patchwork quilt of regulations and laws and social norms to accomplish things. That's systemic. That is working within a system. Trump likes to get out there and just do it directly. And that's what this wall is about. And the wall says that Latinos are not our friends.
We need a wall to keep them out.
We need a wall to keep them out. It's not like America has traditionally been the welcoming country. Mm-hmm. This is not give us you're tired, you're poor, etc., as with the Statue of Liberty. This is the anti-Statue of Liberty. It goes against traditional American values. And it's not seen as anti-American. The Democratic Party has not pointed out that these are anti-American values in talking about the wall.
I think they started to at the end. I do think they started. A lot of it at first was based on the literal aspects of it. Well, we have other ways of doing it. We can have a smart wall. We can have drones. We can have, calling it border security. But I do feel that at the end there, people started to talk about it as a monument to racism.
Well, Nancy came out directly about it. Said this is immoral in just that way. It is a symbolic of racism. It just is. That's its job. Its job is to be symbolic of racism. And when people point out, well, it probably isn't going to work, blah, 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 that's not the point. Mm-hmm. The point is to stay, Americans don't like Latinos.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a big, long, viral tweet about crime rates for immigrants being lower than for Americans. And we all know that, but you're arguing within the frame of criminals, right? Yes. And it's not the right way to don't give that argument the heat. Of course, it was a scientist who was doing it, because scientists love to argue within the frame that is given rather than creating a new frame. But the wall was symbolic, but the ass kicking that Donald Trump just got was not. And I think that's going to cost him. Yeah,
I think so. And especially asking for $5.7 billion for it. And also pinning his very vanity on the wall, because it's easy to say no to his vanity.
Yeah, and one thing that was stunning to me was looking out there and seeing that a lot of Trump supporters seem to suddenly realize the role government plays in their own lives. Mm-hmm. There were people who were apoplectic about the fact that they weren't going to be able to get federal background checks for new jobs they had, or they weren't going to get their SNAP food benefits. And the red states has the largest number of people dependent on SNAP food benefits. And so I saw a lot of people seeming to, while they supported Trump in the wall, they were starting to realize that it really wasn't worth it to them personally. They felt a little betrayed by the fact that Trump would do something that would also hurt their families. And I really felt that the shutdown couldn't go on to the point where the food stamps started flowing, because you're going to have a lot of angry, poor Trump supporters out there who turn their back on you forever for that. Because I think that whatever support you have for racist policy is going to end when you can't feed your children and have to go stand in a bread line. So it was interesting to see how the shutdown, when the effects became real, how people realized how important government is. But also, if you look at Trump today, he's under fire from Ann Coulter, from Fox News, from all kinds of conservative pundits. He lost.
Mm-hmm.
He lost big league.
He's a wimp.
He's a wimp. He's a loser. Caved. That was the number one word. It boosted up in the Google searches. Trump caved. And if there's one thing a strict father cannot be, it's
someone who caves, someone who gives in, somebody who gives away his authority. He has to maintain authority under all accounts. And this was really important in the shutdown of the government, where people didn't quite realize where government was. Government is in air traffic controllers. Gee, no air traffic controllers? What? Air traffic controllers aren't being paid. Should I get on an airline?
Well, that morning LaGuardia was about to shut down, and he ended it immediately.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the impact that would have had?
Sure.
I mean, he was in way over his head. And I think it's worth to note that not only was the strict father beaten at his own game, forced to cave and be a wimp, but he was beaten by a woman. How is the hierarchy going to react to that, George?
Exactly. You can't be beaten by a woman, especially a progressive woman.
I think the Republicans better get used to that.
Yeah.
That's all for this week. See you next time.